PodSaaS, where we're putting the SaaS back in sassy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
Welcome to another episode of PodSaaS. This is Chris Shang, and today we have Michael Bamberger from Tetra Insights. How are you doing, Michael?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. So you're just telling me that you guys are based in Boulder? Or at least you're based in Boulder?
I'm based in Boulder. Our office is in Boulder. Most of our team is distributed throughout the world, but we have, I'd say, like 30% of our team here working out of our office.
Very cool. Very cool. Beautiful place.
That it is. I moved here from New York City like 2.5 years ago. So a big change of lifestyle and pace and scenery, that's for sure.
Yeah, awesome. We'll dive into kind of the reasons why there in a little bit, but I think, I'd like to just get a quick elevator pitch in terms of what Tetra Insights is, and then let me know who your target customers are.
Yeah, we built software for researchers and enterprise companies who do user experience research. So primarily our users are doing things like moderated interviews and unmoderated user tests with their users or target customers. They conduct that research through our platform, analyze it, synthesize it, turn it into video clips, highlights, and insights that they then share with their organization. So we sell almost exclusively to large enterprise businesses that invest heavily in user experience and customer insight.
Can see a lot of value in something like that. So awesome. We'll jump into the story too, the origination story of how you guys got things started. But before we do that, we have a thing like we like to do called rapid fire questions. So just 10 really quick questions, nothing crazy, but just for us to get to know you a little bit better. So if you're all good to go, we can get things started.
Fire away. Let's do it.
Sounds good. First question, easy one. Do you have a favorite entrepreneur and or a startup story?
This might be ironic to say, but I don't really admire entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs sacrifice a lot, but it's for personal gain. I think, the people I admire in the entrepreneur story are their families and their friends and the people who have to support them. But there was one story I read years ago that resonated with me, and that was Andrew Carnegie, this American industrialist. He coined this concept of the gospel of wealth, which meant that wealthy people are morally obligated to give their money back to others in society. So I appreciate that. I respect that perspective. And he put his money where his mouth was and gave away, I think, almost all of his fortune by the time he died.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. Because it is definitely a very difficult toll on those that are around you to start something from scratch and going through that process. Taking you back a little bit, when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, what did you want to be as a kid?
My parents are Jewish immigrants. So when you come to America, it's basically like the holy grail is to have a child that becomes a doctor. So that was pounded into my head for my entire life until I did an internship at the VA hospital in Miami. I think it was after my sophomore year of high school. And I realized that life was just a living hell and it was just awful. And I hated every minute of it. And I'm like, I don't want to be dealing with sick and dying people. I'd rather live a life almost pretending these horrible things don't exist. So that's what I thought I was going to be for a very long time. Despite the fact that I was doing web development and building digital products, that whole time, I didn't see that as a career until a long time later. So
it was really like, I guess, the idea of watching people kind of like go through being sick or I guess like witnessing the fragility of life was a little bit too much to take in on a day in, day out basis.
There was a couple elements of it. Definitely being so close to the hardest parts of the experience of being a human. Yeah. It was too real for me. It was just like, I don't know if I want to be so aware of how difficult and painful life can be every single day. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to be desensitized to that. And the way that doctors, and that, this is in a VA setting, so it's not like other types of physicians, but they dehumanized the patients. A patient was called a case. They were making jokes like while the people were under anesthesia. I'm like, this is so far removed from treating people like humans, which is strange because it's like human care. So it could have just been a bad experience that I had. But also there was other things like, I was in like the break room with these doctors and they're studying for these continuing education exams. And I remember they were like using Avogadro's number, which is like how you how many atoms are there in a molecule or something like that. I'm like, oh my God, I just learned this in 10th grade biology class. You're still using this shit 30 years later. You
Yeah.
still have to do this stuff. I'm like, that doesn't seem fun. I don't want to keep taking tests my whole life. So
Got
I was
it.
just like, this doesn't seem like the lifestyle for me for many reasons,
Got it. Got
much
it.
to my father's chagrin. But what are you going to do?
What can you do? Um, and maybe this goes back to that time period, but what has been like one of the more painful experiences that you've gone through that you feel like was very much like character building? I think a lot of times, there's a lot of growth that comes from discomfort or from hardship. So I'm just curious if it could be professionally or it could be anything personally that you can think of.
So personally, I think some of the experiences I had, where friendships were just like happy go lucky until you get older, and then like girls get involved and there's like competition for girls. Like I lost some friends for very stupid reasons. I dated some people I probably shouldn't have that I regret later on. It cost me some relationships. So, that just made me more aware of like the choices you make and the way you treat people in relationships is it's not one sided. It affects a lot of things and definitely affected my perception on trusting people, who I should trust, how I should trust them. Professionally, I had, without going into too much detail, this is the third company that I started. And my last company, it ended up not going the way that I wanted it to, for really interpersonal reasons, having conflict with my co-founder and realizing this is not someone that I wanted to do business with. And that was extremely difficult. I built a multi-million-dollar company that was, seemingly very successful. And inside I was hating it and I was miserable. And leaving that company was, walking away from a lot of money and a lot of work and people that I had hired and clients that I had signed and people I cared about. And I went into like, after I officially left that business, I went into a depression for like 2 weeks, like a legitimate one. I never experienced that before in my life. And, it was painful. It felt like real suffering. I had to meet with a therapist for the first time in my life and, really be aware of my feelings and how I was acting. And it changed me as a person, changed me as a business person. That's for
Mhm.
sure. Taught me that like the people that I'm working with is probably the most important thing for me. And not just looking, I was very much an opportunist early in my entrepreneurial career, looking for opportunities that can make money and try almost transactionally treating business to just make as much money as I could.
Mhm.
And that led me to do business with people that I shouldn't have and working on projects that that I didn't care about. So it just taught me like, it's not about the money, right? It's really about the experience. It's really about the people. So that was one of the more painful things that I went through for sure.
Wow, it's a great lesson though, and I think it's something that um, a lot of entrepreneurs should be listening to or being more aware of, right? Which is like, you got to know your why, you got to know your purpose, and if it's financially motivated, it will be a difficult path. Let alone you're also putting a lot of challenges that you may not be aware of or think about in that moment in front of you, in terms of like creating unnecessary blockers, perhaps. So definitely, I've heard quite a few of those types of stories where you go into business and the relationships don't turn out well, and you don't choose the right people to be around, and that can tear what is a successful business apart ultimately. So great story. So being having started 3 businesses now, right? We all know that starting a business is hard. So for you to keep persevering to the third one means you must really have a passion for it. And so even when you go through that though, there's a lot of hurdles, there's a lot of obstacles, right? So what motivates you in those moments when your back's like against the wall, to persevere to the next day?
I found a big part for me about why I do what I do is this sense of self actualization. I know I'm capable of so much, and feel like I only have a short period of time on this planet to do stuff with my time. And I don't want to squander it. I don't want to waste it. I want to make the most of it. And for me, the journey is what is fun about it. The highs and lows, the lows don't feel good, but there's something sadistically pleasurable about them. It's like, wow, I'm really living life right now. I'm really experiencing serious emotions. I'm learning incredible lessons. So even though it's not what most people would consider, joyful or happy, for me, there's an element of fulfillment and satisfaction to go through those things. You know, I say to some of the members of my leadership team, like, these failures or challenges that we experience they're the best lessons. I look forward to maybe not learning from failure and struggle, you know, at some point in the future, sometimes near term. But at the same time, it's like, this is the journey. So for me, it's just realizing, like, there's not another thing I'd want to be doing with my time. I have no interest in working a normal job. I have no interest in working for other people. I have no interest in working on problems that I'm not passionate about and don't believe in solving. So it makes it easy to just keep going. You know, and this is being truthful, is like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow on an entrepreneurial journey in SaaS right now, right? Building a B2B SaaS company. It's a very large pot of gold if things go well. So I'd be lying if I said, knowing that if I keep persevering and I keep going at it, that it could change my life and the life of my family forever. That's a part of it as well. You know, I'm on this journey. I've been an entrepreneur for 9 years now. I've done well, but not well enough to never have to work again. And to know that if I keep going, that I could maybe do whatever I want. You know, that definitely is part of it when I'm this far in, right? Yeah. I've made so much progress that I know if I keep going, that it's going to be a great outcome for me. But ultimately, it's about taking some kind of sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in the ups and downs every single day. You know, what's today going to happen? What's going to happen today? What's going to blow up? You know, what kind of disaster do I have waiting for me? It's not always fun, but it's always exciting. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it gives you a purpose every morning. I feel like, you know, I never used to be a morning person until I went into entrepreneurship, and it's like, you know, you pop out of bed, you're curious as to what's going to unfold. I feel like throughout the day, because it is you're doing a lot of things, especially in the early days. Like, you're gonna wear multiple hats, which leads me to my next question: is, has there been a skill that you've picked up along the way while wearing multiple hats as a founder that you either loved or hated?
Definitely, you know, firing people is a skill that I've picked up that I don't love, but it's been so valuable. Knowing how to hold people accountable, creating a plan for performance measurement and accountability. That's my least favorite part of this job, when I have to go through things like that. But now, you know, I'd say early in my entrepreneurial career, I didn't know how to fire people, and I wasn't willing to do it. And every time I fired someone, they were blindsided by it. That's not ideal. So now I've learned, you know, you have to create expectations, you have to create accountability, you have to help people understand how they're being measured and assessed. So I'd say, like, that is one of the more valuable skills. And sometimes, you know, you put 3 people into this plan where you're anticipating it could lead to their termination, but sometimes people surprise you, right? And they step up, and once you hold them to clear accountability, they actually rise to the occasion. So it can be very satisfying to do that, but it's very hard to have, especially I'm a middle child, which makes me like inherently a people pleaser. I like to reduce conflict, right? And to just make people feel good as much as I can. That's like the middle child syndrome largely. So for me, it was really hard to learn the skills of being able to confront people honestly when it's uncomfortable. It's still uncomfortable for me, but I'm much, much better at it now. That's for sure.
It's obviously something that's super important for a lot of founders to be able to do, and be malleable enough, have enough humility to kind of like figure out where their weaknesses are, and to spend the time to actually strengthen those weaknesses. So,
you know, in my last company, my last startup, I was the co-founder, but I wasn't the CEO. Mm-hmm. So this business, I'm the founder and CEO. And my favorite part of this job is how much I'm learning all the time. Every 3 months, I'm reaching a new plateau in terms of my skill set and aptitude. And that feels amazing, right? To just know you're learning so rapidly and being able to apply this knowledge ongoing and seeing outcomes as I'm getting better and smarter and more experienced. That's by far my favorite part of this job. As I mentioned before, I'm learning a lot through mistakes and failure, but I wake up the next day smarter and better. And so, like, my skills now this is one of the challenges. I became an entrepreneur, so 2013, I was 26 years old, right? So pretty young. I'd only worked for other people for like 5 years before I started working for myself. So I never really had executive or management experience. I had a VP title, but like the teams I worked with, like I wasn't managing them. I was working with them, alongside them, getting stuff done. So now, like, I'm learning what it means to actually be a manager, what it means to actually be an executive. It's a whole different skill set. I think like a lot of entrepreneurs who start entrepreneurially young, like you're an individual contributor who's just excellent at doing work and getting stuff done. Those are not the skills that translate well to scaling a business or being a leader, right? You have to know how to empower other people and change your expectations as things happen and how you help people get things done. So for me, like in my last company, the reason, I would just do the work, right? If someone wasn't doing it well enough, like, don't worry about it, I'll do it. And that doesn't work when you're trying to scale a business. You have to actually make sure you have the right person and hold them accountable and create a system of prioritization and measurability and all that. So it's like a whole new job for me. And that's the most fun part right now.
Going back to some of the more personal questions, but what do you do in some of these like high stress situations to decompress for yourself?
So it's difficult, especially because I have 2 young kids, right? I've got a kid who's almost 4 and another one who's almost 1. So my life is incredibly busy. When I'm not working, I'm parenting 2 young children. I say that my weekend job is harder than my Monday through Friday job because the stakes are higher. It's just relentless. So I've actually had to learn over the past 9 months or so, how do I deal with anxiety and stress? I never had dealt with anxiety my whole life until last summer when we were going through our Series A fundraise. Going through fundraising, my wife was pregnant, about to have a baby. I had this 3-year-old kid who's crazy, like a 3-year-old, normal 3-year-old stuff, but it's just like, oh my God, so much work and effort. And it was very stressful. I had personal stuff happening as well with health issues with people in my family. So I was dealing with anxiety that I'd never experienced before. And I made some changes in my life to deal with it. So one is I got medical help. I talked to a doctor, and that helped a lot, right? They prescribed me medication that changed my anxiety, the chemical balance in my brain to deal with it better. That's advice that I try to give everyone, because not that it's like you can take a pill and it solves all your problems, but like getting medical help it can make a huge difference. So I realized like I needed professional help, and I went and got it. And I also realized for me, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, our identity, for me, I can just speak for myself. My identity for 20 years has been caught up in productivity and business. I started my first business when I was 12 years old, a web design company. So it's been 23 years of basically nonstop working for me. And my sense of self has always come from my business related accomplishments, right? Always. And then being a startup founder like this, you hit rough patches, you go through things that are difficult. And I realized when things weren't going the way I wanted them to, that's what caused my anxiety, because my identity was fractured. It's like, am I this great businessman who knows what he's doing all the time? It's like, if I'm not, then what am I? And I had like eschewed every other hobby and interest in my life. So business and parenting was all I've been doing for almost 4 years now, even longer. When I started my business in 2013, I like stopped going out. I stopped, having any hobby. I was just working 7 days a week, basically. And I loved it, right? I didn't see it as a problem. But now I'm like, oh God, I actually need hobbies. So I decided to I stopped following sports years ago. I'm like, I'm going to start watching sports again, right? I'm going to just like follow sports, watch Sports Center, read sports. Like I don't even watch news, right? I watch no news, no media, no anything. I have like no consumption of like popular events in the world. I'm like, I need to like interact with the world a little bit. So I brought sports back into my life, and I'm like, I need to make time for something that I can do on my own. It's like video games. So I bought a Nintendo Switch and I bought an Xbox, and like I play maybe like on average 30 minutes a day, but it's something, right? It's something for me that's separate before I go to bed. So I had to find some hobbies. I had to get some medical help. But yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah. No, I agree 1,000%. I mean, the idea of like just the going 24/7 and, hustling 24/7. I think it's a lot of, entrepreneurs have, I think, like glamorized kind of that experience. There's also like entrepreneurs out there like Alexis Ohanian from Reddit who doesn't do that or doesn't believe in that philosophy. In order, you have to actually like physically be in front doing work, like execution type of work, 24/7. Like that's not necessarily equaling productivity, right? And I think for me too, it's something that I've learned recently where maybe just like the past couple of years, to not be so hard on yourself when you're taking those breaks throughout the day. and I even like tell employees now too, it's like, I don't care when you actually do the work, just make it, deadline focused and getting deliverables done. Because I think taking breaks throughout the day is very healthy and it's very important. And I've actually found that a lot of those times you find the solutions to your biggest problems in those moments too. Because it's like that moment of disconnecting from your work and sitting in front of something trying to solve it, it breaks the monotony of that. And you can get to things sometimes a lot faster.
I've definitely found the same thing. A little bit of distance goes a long way.
Yeah.
But it's also like phase of life. I was, my first job out of college, I was an investment banker. Then I worked at a private equity firm. And then I started my own consulting company in New York City. So like the grind is just what there was. I didn't know any different. And in my 20s, it was fun. It's like, there's some like perverse clout you get for how many hours you work when you're in your 20s and living in a big city. So like I was happy to tell people I'm working like 80 hours this week, like now I look back like that's the stupidest thing. Like who's like that's not good. But at a phase of life like that, I felt good, right? I'm like, look at me, I'm moving and shaking, I'm doing all these things. Now I'm in my mid 30s, I have a family. It's like, I'm not working 80 hours, I'm not even working 60 hours, right? I aspire to be working 40 hours. And if I were to tell that to myself 10 years ago, I'd be like, well, someone's moving faster than you, right? Someone's doing more than you. But the truth is no, my hours are so much more productive now. My ability to prioritize and focus and know what actually moves the needle is 10 times improved because I'm not just doing too much. And, it helps you maintain your mental health and your physical health and your spiritual health and all these other things that actually do matter for long-term success. You can invest in them when you're not, it's like digging holes. You could, look, I dug 100 holes today. Like, who gives a shit? Like, this is not to dig holes.
Yeah.
Right? You're trying to build something. So it's like hard work is not smart work. I think that's one of the hardest lessons to learn.
Yeah, for sure. And it does come with experience and just different phases of life, for sure. Cool. Last question here, but it's an important one, and it's the idea of legacy. And, the other way that I kind of phrase it, because it can sometimes be mistaken as like being self-serving to a certain degree, but, question then would be, what impact would you like to leave on this world?
So, I don't really think about what people will think about me once I'm dead. Right? I believe like you're dead, you're gone. The world forgets about you really quickly, right? 200 years is no time in the macroscopic lens, but it's forever for like us in our time. So I don't really worry so much about how people are going to think about me. And I don't care if people know who I am after I'm gone. I don't really care if people know who I am right now, right? It doesn't matter to me. But I think the biggest impact I would like to leave now at this point in my life is like raising children who are good, kind people and add to the total value equation of humanity of like, these are good ones to have around as opposed to pieces of shit and assholes, right? Which like maybe most people are. So for me, it's like being a good dad, raising good humans, good citizens, people who care about others. Like if when I'm gone, like that's what I've left behind me, kids who are also good parents and are raising kind, generous people, then I feel like I've done a great job. And if I'm thinking about, how people do think about me, it's really how I made them feel. I want people to think that I'm kind, right? That I treat them with respect, that I was understanding, that I wasn't a jerk, and that I operated with integrity. That's I've learned is really critical to me. It's one of the reasons I left my last company is I didn't feel like my co-founder and I were aligned about what it meant to be or to have integrity in business. I want my reputation to be that of someone people can trust, a handshake agreement is an agreement. It's as good as a contract. That's how I want people to think of me now.
Yeah, a lot of people will talk about, the business legacy, right? But I know at least like half the guests that I've had so far are parents. And, I think it is important. And when I think of legacy, I think outside of like entrepreneurship, I tend to think of like parents looking towards their children and what that legacy that they leave behind is instilled in their children. To carry on whatever they can influence as part of them growing up being better human beings. Cool. So I would love to dive more now into kind of like your story. And you had mentioned that you've done 3 different businesses now, 2 other businesses prior to this, but you're doing a web business when you're like 12, 13 years old. And then you tell me, you're doing the internship at the VA hospital, and then you're doing investment banking out of college. What's that journey look like for you? Because I feel like I've had some similar experiences in terms of like going out, starting off in investment banking. Then I did like a 180, ended up in like TV and film production. Then I ended up starting my first business like 10 years ago. And then been on that path ever since. But how did you get to that path of entrepreneurship? I mean, obviously the bug was itching you when at a very young age, but it seems like there's a break between that point in your life to where you really pursued the idea of building a business.
This is all in reflection about myself over the years. When I was a kid, I was like obsessed with material goods and like money, for whatever reason. I grew up in South Florida, which is a very materialistic, flashy place. I went to a middle school and high school that was like very wealthy and very flashy, and it affected me. And I wanted, I was compelled by making money and having prestige, and like I cared a lot about what people thought about me. So I started just, I remember it was one summer where like my friends went to sleepaway camp and I didn't. I just was like on AOL all day, right? Maybe it was AIM at that point. I can't recall exactly, but I got into there was these apps. I don't even know if you remember this. They were called like progs and punters. And it was like the type of thing you go into chat rooms and like you share this software and it like hacks AOL. So you can do stupid shit, like keep people offline or make text look like wavy and fading from one color to another. So that's how I got into programming. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I learned how to build those things using Microsoft's Visual Basic platform. It wasn't like the coding language. It was like a whole platform that they had. And then I'm like, oh, let me just see what other kind of development you can do. And then I've learned you can just like right click on a website and click view source and see how it was made. I'm like, well, that's interesting. And back then code was very simple. Like it wasn't like now where code is like hidden and minified and all this stuff and unreadable. You could just read it and you could copy it and you could paste it in Notepad and upload it. And there you had a website. So I just like started doing that. I was like, oh, I can build websites. It's actually pretty easy. And I'm like, well, let me try and sell some stuff doing this. That was like the first thing that came to my mind. So I spent like all summer learning how to do that. Then went to local businesses being like, hey, I'll build a website for you, like $500. I'll build your website. And I got like a bunch of clients and, just started that way. And for me, it was just like about making money. I did a bunch of other random stuff on the internet as I did that. Like I sold stuff on eBay. So I would look for like what products people are buying. Back then, like CDR drives and CDRW drives were like huge. They weren't easy to find. So I would go on to this, I think the website was called like warehouse411.com. It was like international suppliers of random electronics. And I would post like, I'm looking for electronics to resell here in the US. And these people would send me all these free products. And then I'd buy a bunch of them. And I'd have like my bedroom underneath my bed, like a bunch of CDR drives. And I'd sell them on eBay. So I started doing that. And then like I had a friend who found a connection in China who customized Nike Air Force Ones. This was right when the Nelly song came out. So he and I were selling Nike Air Force Ones through the web. And it was, I learned later pretty quickly, like, oh, these are counterfeit goods that I'm selling. Like, I'm going to stop doing that. But I wrote guides for like how to get free electronics, because I had this experience of like working with these international companies who send you free electronics. I wrote an ebook about it. This is when I was like 13 years old. Sold it on eBay for like $10 a pop, made thousands of dollars. So I was doing all this random stuff really just to make money. I didn't even realize what I was doing. I didn't realize it was entrepreneurial at all. I'm like, it's just a money-making scheme, basically. But then I got more and more into website development, started building bigger projects and making some of my own stuff. And then, I never saw it as a career. I never saw it as like a job. For me, it was just like a thing to do that was fun to make money. I would stay up all night building websites. And then when I went to college, my dad really wanted me to be a doctor. I'm like, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm not interested in that, but I'll do like some other white collar job. So I went to college. It's like, what are the jobs that people get out of this school? And it was like management consulting or investment banking. I'm like, well, what's the difference? Well, as an investment banker, you'll make $100,000 your first year. As a consultant, you'll make like $55,000. Like, well, I guess I'm going to be an investment banker. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea, but I knew it was prestigious and I knew that you make a lot of money. So I ended up doing like banking internships and then took a banking job. for no reason other than like that just seemed like a path that my family was okay with, and it was going to be lucrative, and other people would be like, oh, you've got a great job. I get to live in a fancy big city, right? And then when I got into actually doing that job, I'm like, oh my God, this sucks. Like, this is absolutely awful. I hated my life. I hated the people I worked with. This was also like right after the financial crash. This was in 2009. So like, it was just not a good time to be in this industry. It was just like I mean, the thing when I realized like I can't do this job, it's like we were sitting in our offices wearing ties, and when the clock hit 6 p.m., we take our ties off. I'm looking around. I'm like, there's no one here. It's just us. It's like, who are we doing this for? What's this fancy? Like, what the hell is going on? This doesn't make any sense. I'm just like, it's bizarre. It's like living in like some fake reality with these rules that just are arbitrary. Like, why am I wearing a suit? There's no one. It's just us. Like, there's no clients here. No one sees me. I'm an analyst. I just sit here on spreadsheets and in PowerPoint all day. Like, why do I have to dress like this? Why does it matter? It just didn't make any sense to me. And I was very fortunate that I got recruited by a private equity firm where an alumni from my college actually read about me in Dartmouth Alumni Magazine, where it said like I'd built this web project for like the Dartmouth Giving Fund or whatever. And he Googled me and he came across all these websites I had built. He actually submitted a contact form through one of my websites saying, I'm trying to get in touch with Michael Bamberger. So I email him back. He's like, we're a private equity firm. We've been idle for a few years. We're now buying a bunch of companies. We're looking for someone who knows how to build digital products. We're buying traditional media companies and turning them around. We're looking for someone who knows how to do that kind of work. I'm like, yeah, this sounds great. So I took that job. I left the investment bank and I worked there for 4 years. And it was the best. I mean, it was a great job. I got to work across all different companies, learning how to build complex strategies, how to purchase assets and turn them into new businesses, how to launch completely new products from end to end. My bosses were never going to give me the same stake they have in the companies, right? And it was going to be a long journey for me to be doing everything that I wanted to do. And I realized I can just do the same work. It's basically digital strategy and digital product development work. I could do it directly for brands and make way more money and be my own boss and probably be a lot happier. And that's when I realized like, that's what I've been wanting to do my whole life, working for myself, being in control, being able to do whatever I wanted to. So I was actually able to turn a few of our portfolio companies into clients. And I left without having like that gap that most people have when they start their own thing of like, I'm not making any money. I was within 6 months of starting my consulting firm, I was making twice as much money as I was making at the private equity firm. And that's how I kind of got into my entrepreneurial career. So from there, like I helped incubate a few startups. One of them really took off. This company that's now called Feedback Loop, which is where I ended up being the co-founder and running that company for like 3 years. And that's how I got started on this journey. And now I left that company in like 2017. I took that year off. I got married. I was doing research on what my next business was going to do, and basically got started working on Tetra in 2018.
Oh, cool.
That was a long story. I could have abridged that a little bit. Sorry.
No. It was a great story though. I think it's good to hear all the details because I think I don't think enough, we don't get enough color a lot of the times of like what the steps are to kind of like go on, right? And I think I don't think it's not a unique feeling. I think others in investment banking or in finance or, a lot of these white collar jobs, I would say a lot of them, probably more than 50% aren't actually really happy with the work that they're actually doing. There's obviously different things that it's feeding back to you and it's giving you a lifestyle or, paycheck or, savings and the ability to do some things, but it's not truly freedom. I don't feel like sometimes, and it can feel very draining. And I think it's important to share those stories because there's those that need to be encouraged a little bit to know that there is another side to it and that you can get out of that and then go and do your own thing. And you can do it successfully and you can do it in a way that is, a little bit more secure and safe and comfortable and not as, risky as it typically comes across in terms of like going out and trying to start something.
I feel very privileged in two ways because I think a lot of people are pursuing ego validation their whole careers.
Yeah.
And as a young person who got to go to a prestigious college and then got a prestigious job and had good accolades, I checked those boxes early. I'm like, oh, this means nothing, right? I don't care what people think of me. My ego's been validated and it means nothing.
Yeah.
So I wasn't seeking that, right? Like I did those things young and it was like, okay, this means nothing.
Yeah.
And then I made good money young as well. And I realized making 6-figure income also doesn't make me happy. Right? So it's like the two things I thought I cared about, I realized are completely meaningless. But I only knew that by achieving them.
Yeah.
So that is a gift to accomplish some of your goals and to realize that they aren't your real goals. So I think most people are probably pursuing that ego validation and a high annual income forever, right? I was happier making no money the first 3 years of building this company than I ever was working at the private equity firm. It's not about the money, right? And I'm obscure. No one knows who I am. No, I'm not working for a brand that anyone's like, oh, you work for that company? It's like, what company do you work for? Right? But it's like, it's only now I can do that because I don't care.
Yeah.
So like those are, I understand the privilege of having had those things. So when I talk about self-actualization, right? That's what my goal is now. But it's personal. It's based on what I actually want. It's all for me. It's not for anyone else. I don't care what people think. It's not even for my lifestyle is very simple now, right? Like I'm not materialistic. I don't buy anything. I shop at Costco. Like that's the life I live now. So I've been able to like kind of go through a few turns to end up where like what's right for me.
I mean, I think, yeah, that's true. Everybody has to go through that on their own, or, maybe they don't and they just end up going through their life and then finding other avenues of happiness. So cool. And so you've built the business now. How old? You said 2018 is when you kind of like started Tetra Insights, right? And so how was that journey like? Do you have a co-founder as well here, or is this just you started it by yourself, or how did that work, and how did you develop the idea? The idea of then building it, taking it to market. Those first few months to a year, even a couple of years, I think, it's like you're trying to get market fit validation, right? And that's always a little bit of a challenge. So when you do get there, you get market fit validation, then it's kind of like off to the races to a certain degree. But how was that experience like? What were some of the learnings? Walk us through what that was experience.
I'll go back to where the idea came from and how I turned it into a reality.
Yeah.
And I'll try and give the shortest version of this. So, my whole career I realized in retrospect, has been about two things. It's about helping teams get aligned with a shared understanding of what to do and what they're doing. And relatedly, helping those teams make decisions with confidence. Working with big companies, working at the private equity firm, it's like getting aligned and making decisions is the hardest thing that inside a business typically. And usually it's just whoever's the boss makes the decision or whatever. So I realized I had to figure out ways of influencing people by getting research and getting data. And that became kind of my angle for how I was influential. Always, I was the VP of research at the private equity firm and in all of our portfolio companies, because research and data was my language for influencing people in decisions. So anyway, when I started my consultancy, it was very data oriented, conversion optimization, measuring what works, testing things, and helping companies to make decisions by giving them a framework for this is what a good decision looks like. And then when I started Feedback Loop, what we were doing was basically helping enterprise companies validate their innovation roadmap or validate their product roadmap. And we would do all kinds of data work to help them answer questions. So it could be something as simple as like usability testing an existing product, or should we launch this entirely new product line? So we would get all kinds of data to try and inform the decision. And I kind of had two epiphanies while building that company. The first one was, my background was more quantitative and analytics oriented. And my co-founder introduced me to this concept of user research, user testing, unmoderated user tests and user interviews as a way to validate things, putting prototypes in front of people and seeing how they interact with them. And we started doing that. And, we would present a report to our clients, like big enterprise brands that had charts, graphs, data, survey data, third-party data, and maybe a handful of like links to video clips we had pulled out of these user tests or interviews. And very quickly, I saw that when we put these video clips in front of decision makers, grouped by theme, grouped by finding, grouped by question, by persona, that was the data that was by far the most influential for them. It allowed their teams to get aligned with a shared understanding, and it allowed them to, again, make those decisions with confidence. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, it was bizarre to me. Like, we have millions of rows of data that we're processing in some sort of part of the report, and then like 3 quotes from people. And those 3 quotes are what cut through the noise and made an impact and had them make decisions. So I'm like, okay, there's something here. So in that business, we leaned into that. We're like, let's do way more user interviews, way more unmonitored user tests. And it really worked. We were able to grow that business to 2 million ARR in the first 18 months by focusing on giving qualitative data back to these companies very easily. So the problem with that business is we weren't able to scale that work. Going through all of these interviews, all of this video content, cutting it up into clips and findings by theme, by segment, we were doing it manually. So like putting into iMovie, exporting these clips, then send them to the client. So it would take days of work to just get like one turn. And then if the client came back and said, well, what about for this segment of users? Or what did anyone say about this topic? It's like, oh crap, we have to go back through the data again, do that whole process again. So we didn't have the technology to scale that. We ended up doing more automated testing. So unmoderated tests like click tracking, simple question and answers, survey data. But I had this epiphany that if companies could use this qualitative insight data as easily as they use quantitative data, this would be the biggest impact on decision making that I've ever seen in my career. So that was like the first epiphany, that making qualitative data easy to access, easy to use, easy to analyze, turn into insights and share. This is going to change decision making for businesses. The second insight I had was that companies had learned that. So like in the first year at that company, our clients were product managers, VPs of innovation, things like that. In year 2, the people in our meetings were different. It was product managers, designers, user experience designers, and user experience researchers, or user researchers, which is a title I'd never seen before. I'm like, what is going on? These people are asking questions about methodology, about scope, about the people we're doing the research with, about how we ask the questions. I'm like, what? Everyone just used to take the data and be like, thanks, and run with it. And now we're getting all of this scrutiny. And I realized companies were bringing this insight practice in-house because they realized how valuable it was. So that's where the idea for Tetra came from. Is I realized that qualitative data could be transformative for businesses, and that companies were investing in practitioners internally to actually do this work. So that's how I started Tetra. I basically left that company in 2017, did research all of 2017 and into 2018, talking to researchers, talking to product managers, talking to engineers. I did like 50 interviews with people, drinking my own Kool-Aid, and came up with this idea for Tetra, a platform that allows people to more easily conduct, analyze, and share insights from their qualitative research. So that was where the idea came from. So in 2018, I brought a friend of mine to be my co-founder. He had been doing consulting work for me for years. And he worked for a big company, like, come work with me. It's going to be much more fun. He may not have had so much fun this time. It's been very hard work for him, but I wanted to work with a friend. I learned I didn't want to work with like a co-founder I didn't know in my last business, someone I trusted. And my model was to start with professional services revenue. I knew I could sell that. So rather than have to go and raise funding, I was able to fund the business myself and through some contracts that we signed. So I chose a co-founder who could handle those professional services engagements, basically. So we had a revenue base to grow from. So 2018, hired an engineer, was working with my friend, worked on an MVP that we launched basically at the beginning of 2019 into just like beta testing with early users. We got a lot of great feedback. We did a lot of iteration on their product. And some of our enterprise clients came to us and said, we'd like to pay you for this. Like, okay, we can do that. So we got our first paying customers in 2019. And then just kept building the product. I wanted to focus. Our mistake in my last business was not focusing on product enough. We're very sales oriented. That ended up biting us in the butt because our product didn't evolve fast enough. So at this company, we invested 100% in product. And then 2019, we got users. We were able to see how valuable it is. We were iterating, becoming really sticky inside big companies, signed a few decent sized contracts. We were able to deploy the solution like in pretty largely across enterprises to really validate it. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, like I thought we were screwed, but I was wrong. Like our space grew more than ever. And then we raised a seed round in the summer of 2020. Went to market with our offering, basically deciding we're going to focus on enterprise companies. That's where I saw the biggest opportunity, the biggest differentiation opportunity in the market. And it went really well. In the beginning of 2021, we had onboarded several high 5-figure and 6-figure enterprise contracts. That gave us enough confidence to raise our Series A last summer, which we closed in September timeframe. And now we're basically in the point of the company where we have really satisfied customers. We've got growing revenue, all pretty premier enterprise brands. And now we're growing our team. So building out our product engineering org to be really world-class, and really getting started building our go-to-market team. We're just at the beginning of that. So we don't have a large go-to-market team. Again, we've been investing in product and engineering because we sell to enterprise customer experience, customer success. But now we're really building out the whole business. So it's been a fun journey, very much like learn, iterate, validate. Once we pass each validation gate, then invest, then grow. I've tried to be very kind of patient and thoughtful about what we're developing. So because my last company, it felt like it was fool's gold at certain points, right? We had a lot of cash, a lot of revenue, and no product. I want to make sure we're not, some things are going to move faster than others, but I don't want it to be sales and marketing is, 100 miles ahead of product. Product is a little bit ahead, sales and marketing catches up, and then, kind of balance from there, which is where we're getting to this year, basically.
I think we can wrap things up here just by one more question before we do that. And that's, where do you imagine Tetra to be in the next 5 years, right? Like, do you foresee some kind of exit, or is it something that you really want to, spend the next 10 years of your life just continue to reach maximum potential of what the business can be?
In a perfect world, we would keep growing this business. It would be its own company that becomes big and massive on its own. And for the personal reason for that is I am excited for the challenges of scaling a business as a CEO, right? Every stage of our business, I'm learning more. So personally, it would be very rewarding for me to just see that whole journey through. I think practically our market is growing so fast, and the valuations in our segment are just so absurd, and will continue to be so because of how fast it's growing, that there's a lot of, we already get interest from potential acquirers, strategic and financial, now while we're still so small. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do have an exit in the next 5 years, but in my perfect world, I'd get to just keep growing this. I love having a business in my image with the culture that I believe in, treating people the way that I think is the right way to do things. So once you get acquired, you can't do that. It's someone else's image, right? So ideally we do that, but I think optionality is what I'm optimizing for. So we'll see what's the best for everyone as things unfold.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. Excited to see what happens and how it does unfold for you guys. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for spending the time with us too, and sharing your story. I thought it was very insightful and very cool experience.
Cathartic, like a therapy session for me. I appreciate it.
Me too. It was great. But awesome. Thanks so much for doing this again. Wish you guys the best of luck.
I appreciate that. You have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Chris.
Same. Thanks.